"You're innocent, but I'll make you a prisoner of my desire." The cowboy confessed to the preacher. The sun hung low over the small town of Red River, painting the dusty streets in golden light. Eli, the young preacher, adjusted the brim of his worn hat as he stepped off the stagecoach. He had heard stories of this town. Some spoke of its kind people. Others whispered of trouble lurking behind every corner. For Eli, though, the town was more than just a place. It was a chance to serve, to bring comfort and guidance to those who needed it most. He carried his Bible close to his chest, a familiar weight that reminded him of home, of faith, and of the quiet life he had always hoped to lead. As he walked down the main street, the sound of boots on wood and the faint clinking of spurs echoed through the air. The town was alive with the late afternoon bustle. Children running barefoot, merchants calling out their goods, and horses tied to posts stamping impatiently. Eli's eyes scanned the streets, taking in the simplicity of it all, yet sensing a tension underneath. Something about Red River felt alive, like a secret waiting to be discovered. He was heading toward the small wooden church at the edge of town, a modest building with peeling paint and a single bell that swayed in the wind. Eli pushed the door open, the smell of aged wood and candle wax greeting him. Inside, the pews were empty, the silence broken only by the creak of the floorboards beneath his boots. He walked to the pulpit, running his fingers over the polished wood, imagining the people who would soon sit here seeking guidance and solace. Suddenly, a commotion outside drew his attention. Shouts echoed from the street, followed by the sound of crashing wood. Eli hurried outside, curiosity and concern driving his steps. He rounded the corner and saw a group of rough-looking men surrounding someone, their faces shadowed by hats and sunburn. In the center stood a man unlike any he had seen before. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a rugged face and eyes that seemed to hold a storm within them, he moved with a dangerous confidence. The man's name was Cain. He was a cowboy, a drifter known for his strength and his unpredictable nature. But at that moment, he wasn't thinking about reputations or fights. He was focused on protecting someone, and that someone happened to be Eli. One of the men lunged at Cain, swinging a heavy fist. Cain dodged with a fluid motion, his boots kicking up dust as he moved. With a swift, precise action, he disarmed the man, leaving him stumbling backward. The others hesitated, unsure how to respond to such skill and calm. Eli stood frozen, his heart pounding. He had seen violence before, but never like this. Never with such grace and control. Cain's eyes met his for a brief moment, and Eli felt something unfamiliar stir within him. There was a danger there, yes, but also a strange magnetism, a pull he could not explain. Cain's lips curved slightly in a half-smile, half-smirk, and then, as if sensing Eli's presence, he spoke, "You shouldn't be here, preacher. This isn't a place for the innocent." Eli swallowed, unsure how to respond. His voice felt small compared to the rough energy surrounding them. I am just passing through. I mean no trouble." Cain studied him for a moment, the sun glinting off his hat, casting shadows across his sharp features. "Innocent, huh?" he murmured, almost to himself. "In a town like this, innocence is rare." There was a weight to his words, a mixture of curiosity and something else Eli couldn't name. The tension in the street slowly eased as the crowd dispersed, leaving Cain and Eli alone. The cowboy tipped his hat slightly, a gesture both casual and deliberate. "You should get inside," he said, nodding toward the church. "Safe for now, at least." Eli nodded, his fingers tightening around the strap of his satchel. He walked toward the church, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter was more than chance. Something about Cain's presence lingered in the air, like a shadow that refused to leave. Over the next few days, Eli settled into his new life in Red River. He preached to small congregations, visited homes of the sick and the elderly, and tried to bring a sense of peace to a town that seemed to be on the edge of chaos. Yet, no matter where he went, he found himself thinking of Cain. The cowboy appeared here and there, at the stables near the saloon, or walking silently through the streets at dusk. Every time their eyes met, Eli felt the same stir of tension and curiosity. Cain, for his part, observed Eli with interest. He had never met someone so steadfast, so grounded in their beliefs, and yet so quietly daring. There was a light in Eli that Cain found impossible to ignore, a purity that seemed to challenge everything he knew about himself. He found reasons to cross paths with the preacher, sometimes offering help, sometimes merely appearing at the edge of a moment, watching, waiting. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Cain approached Eli while he was closing the church doors. "Preacher," he said softly, leaning against the wooden frame, "you carry yourself like the world can't touch you. But the world, it always finds a way." Eli looked up, meeting Cain's gaze. "I try to do what is right," he said, "even when it's hard." Cain's eyes softened slightly, a rare vulnerability flickering across his face. "Right, huh? And yet, here you are, surrounded by all the wrongs of this town and still standing. That's impressive." The words sent a shiver down Eli's spine. There was something raw and honest in Cain's tone, something that drew him in despite the caution in his heart. He wanted to ask more, to understand the man who seemed both dangerous and magnetic. But the words caught in his throat. Days turned into weeks, and Eli and Cain's paths continued to cross. Each encounter brought a new layer of complexity. Cain showing kindness in unexpected moments, Eli struggling to reconcile his growing fascination with the cowboy's unpredictable nature. The town watched quietly, sensing the unusual bond forming between the two, though no one fully understood it. One night, after a particularly long day visiting parishioners, Eli found himself walking along the river that cut through the outskirts of town. The water reflected the moonlight, calm and silver, yet carrying a quiet undercurrent. He was lost in thought when a shadow moved along the bank. Cain stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. "You shouldn't be walking alone," Cain said, his voice low, carrying that same mix of warning and interest. Eli shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm not afraid of the river." Cain studied him, his sharp eyes softening. "Maybe not the river," he said slowly, "but life. Life has ways of catching the innocent off guard." He stepped closer, close enough that Eli could feel the faint heat of his presence. "You're innocent," Cain said finally, almost a whisper. "But I can't help. I feel like I want to protect you, even if you don't want it." Eli's breath caught. The words were heavy, loaded with meaning he couldn't yet fully grasp. There was desire, yes, but also a promise of protection, a pull that both terrified and intrigued him. He looked at Cain, trying to read the man's intentions, and found only honesty in the gaze that met his. For the first time, Eli realized that his life in Red River was about to change. The town, the people, even his faith, they all felt like they were being tested, challenged by a presence that was both threatening and magnetic. Cain was a man of the frontier, wild and untamed, and yet there was something in him that mirrored Eli's own strength, his own quiet resolve. That night, as Eli returned to the church and locked the doors, he found himself thinking of Cain long after the moon had risen. There was danger in the cowboy's eyes, yes, but there was also a spark of something profound, something that Eli could not ignore. He realized that he was standing at the edge of a new world, a world where innocence and desire, faith and temptation could exist side by side. And somewhere, in the quiet darkness of the town, Cain watched, knowing that the preacher's heart was no longer entirely his own. Days in Red River passed like slow-moving clouds, but for Eli, each day seemed longer than the last. His duties as a preacher kept him busy, yet his thoughts often wandered to Cain. The cowboy's presence lingered in his mind like the echo of a distant storm. Every glance, every gesture, seemed to carry a message Eli could not yet understand. He had always believed in clear lines, right and wrong, good and bad. But Cain blurred all of them, and in that blurring, Eli felt a strange excitement that both thrilled and scared him. Cain, meanwhile, was a man of habit and observation. He had roamed many towns and faced countless dangers, yet something about Eli caught him off guard. The preacher's calm strength, the way he spoke to people with patience and care, and the unshakable kindness in his eyes, it all drew Cain in, like a fire he could neither resist nor control. He found himself seeking excuses to cross paths with Eli, sometimes helping with small favors, sometimes merely appearing when Eli least expected him. One morning, as Eli was walking to the small market to buy supplies, he noticed Cain leaning casually against the post of the general store. His hat was tilted low, shadowing his face, and his hands rested loosely on the leather straps of his satchel. When Cain saw Eli, a slow smile spread across his face. "Preacher," he said, his voice carrying that same mixture of warmth and challenge, "you look like you're thinking too hard again. Shouldn't you be saving the town from its sins instead?" Eli chuckled softly, shaking his head. "And should you be causing trouble instead of keeping it in check?" he replied, trying to hide the way his heart had skipped a beat at the sight of Cain. Cain laughed, a low, rolling sound that made people nearby glance over. "I suppose we all have our roles," he said, straightening. "But sometimes, even a cowboy likes to watch someone else carry the weight of the world." He paused, then added, almost thoughtfully, "I've never seen anyone like you, not in all the towns I've passed through." The words hung in the air, heavier than Eli expected. He felt an unexpected warmth, a strange connection to this man who had walked into his life like a sudden gust of wind. For a moment, Eli's resolve wavered. He wanted to know Cain better, to understand the man behind the dangerous charm and the unpredictable life. Over the next week, their encounters became more frequent, though still seemingly coincidental. Cain appeared when Eli delivered food to the elderly, always offering help, sometimes lending a hand without saying a word, and each time Eli found himself noticing details he had not before. The way Cain's eyes softened when he spoke to a child, or how his hands moved with precision, whether feeding horses or fixing a loose fence. The town saw Cain as rough, perhaps reckless, but Eli glimpsed a careful, thoughtful side hidden beneath the rugged exterior. One evening, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. Eli was closing the church after a long day, his body tired but his mind restless. Cain appeared at the edge of the porch, his shadow stretching long across the ground. "You're always so busy," he said lightly, yet there was a seriousness beneath his tone. "Don't you ever stop to rest?" Eli set down his satchel, brushing dust from his coat. "Rest comes after the work," he replied, though even he felt the tension in his voice. He wanted to ask Cain why he seemed to follow him, but the words felt fragile, unsure. Cain stepped closer, his boots crunching softly against the dirt. "And what if the work never ends?" he asked, almost to himself. "What then, preacher?" Eli looked at him, sensing the weight behind the question. Cain's eyes held a vulnerability that was rare for a man so used to solitude and wandering. It was a side of him that few saw, and Eli found himself wanting to be the one to see it. But he also knew the danger in getting too close to someone so untamed, someone whose life was full of unpredictable turns. Days later, Eli visited a family on the outskirts of town, a widow with 2 young children who struggled to make ends meet. Cain appeared unexpectedly, helping with heavy crates of food and supplies. Eli watched as Cain lifted the boxes with ease, his strength obvious, yet his movements careful, considerate. After finishing, Cain turned to Eli and said softly, "You do a lot for people who barely know you. That's rare. And you do a lot for people who might not even deserve it," he said. Cain's eyes met his, and for a moment neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of care, strength, and an unacknowledged bond that was growing steadily. That night, Eli returned home, his mind restless. He could not stop thinking about Cain's words, Cain's presence, the way his heart seemed to respond to something forbidden, yet comforting. He wondered if he was losing control over his emotions, or if this was simply the natural pull between 2 people who, despite all differences, were meant to understand each other. Cain, on the other hand, was sitting by the campfire outside town, watching the smoke curl into the night sky. He thought about Eli constantly. He had faced danger, storms, and countless battles, yet he had never felt so unsettled, so drawn to someone. There was a purity in Eli, a strength that was not of muscle but of heart and spirit. Cain wanted to protect that, to be close, yet he feared his own nature, his past, his wandering ways, and the reputation that followed him. Their paths crossed again the following week. Eli was teaching children outside the church, showing them letters and stories from the Bible, when Cain appeared, leaning against a fence at the edge of the yard. The children giggled at his rugged appearance, yet Cain's smile was gentle, patient. He watched Eli teach, seemingly fascinated by the way he moved, spoke, and connected with the young ones. When the lesson ended, Eli approached Cain cautiously. "You seem to enjoy watching," he said, a hint of teasing in his voice. Cain shrugged, eyes softening. "I enjoy seeing someone do what they love, even if it's not what I understand." His tone carried a sincerity that surprised Ellie. "There's a strength in you, preacher, not the kind people see on the outside, but inside. It's compelling." Eli felt a rush of warmth, and for a moment he allowed himself to simply stand there, absorbing the words. He wanted to respond, to confess the pull he felt toward Cain, but he held back, unsure how to voice feelings that seemed both new and dangerous. Days turned into weeks, and a subtle rhythm developed between them. Cain was often present in Eli's life, sometimes in ways that seemed coincidental, sometimes deliberately. He helped, protected, and even challenged Eli, though always in small ways that left a lasting impression. Eli found himself thinking of Cain at night, wondering about the man behind the rugged exterior, and feeling emotions he had never expected. One evening, as a storm rolled over Red River, lightning illuminating the sky and thunder rolling in the distance, Eli was walking home from a parish visit. The wind picked up, rain began to pour, and he struggled with his coat flapping in the gusts. Out of the storm appeared Cain, running toward him with a blanket in hand. "You can't walk through a storm like this alone," Cain said, draping the coat around Eli's shoulders. His hand brushed Eli's in the process, and a small spark of something unspoken passed between them. "You might not admit it, but even someone as strong as you needs help sometimes." Eli looked at him, the rain dripping down both of their faces, and felt a pull he could no longer deny. Cain's words, his presence, and the quiet way he cared for others, All of it stirred emotions deep within Eli, emotions that conflicted with everything he had believed about himself. For the first time, Eli realized that his life in Red River was changing in ways he could not control. Cain was not merely a cowboy passing through. He was a force that challenged him, stirred him, and made him see life differently. And though Eli tried to resist, a quiet, undeniable connection was forming, a connection that neither could ignore. As they stood there in the rain, sharing a moment that was both simple and profound, Eli understood one truth. He was drawn to Cain in a way that defied logic, a bond that was as deep as it was unexpected. And Cain, watching the preacher with a mixture of admiration and longing, knew that his life had been forever altered by the man who carried faith, kindness, and strength in equal measure. The days in Red River grew hotter as summer approached, and with the heat came a sense of restlessness. Eli felt it deep in his chest, a tension he could not explain. His life had always been steady, predictable even, but Cain's presence had shifted everything. Each glance from the cowboy, each casual smile, carried weight, leaving Eli both unsettled and intrigued. He found himself thinking about Cain constantly, wondering what lay behind those stormy eyes and rugged exterior. Cain, as always, moved like a shadow through the town. He appeared when Eli least expected him, helping an old man repair a fence, guiding lost travelers through the heat, or simply leaning against a post, watching Eli go about his work. There was a purpose in Cain's presence, a subtle insistence that Eli could not ignore. And the more time they spent together, the more Eli realized that his curiosity had grown into something stronger, a mix of admiration, concern, and a deep, unspoken connection. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Ellie walked toward the outskirts of town to visit a family struggling after a fire had damaged their home. He carried baskets of food and blankets, but before he could reach the small cabin, he spotted Cain leaning against a tree, surveying the area. "Cain," Eli called softly, unsure why he felt the need to announce himself. Cain turned, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said, his voice calm yet carrying that familiar intensity. "Need some help?" Eli hesitated, then nodded. Together they carried supplies to the cabin, each step revealing small pieces of Cain's character that Eli hadn't seen before. He noticed the care Cain took with the children, guiding them gently to avoid splinters and sharp debris. He saw the patience in Cain's movements, the careful way he assessed the damage and offered solutions. Eli realized that this man, who seemed so wild and unpredictable, had a heart capable of great thoughtfulness. After the work was done, they sat on the edge of a small creek nearby, the water rushing gently over smooth stones. Cain kicked his boots into the water, watching the ripples spread. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "I've seen a lot of towns, met a lot of people, but none like you. You carry yourself with something I can't put into words. It's different." Eli looked down at the water, unsure how to respond. The words stirred something in him, a mix of warmth and apprehension. "I just try to do what I believe is right," he said softly. "Even when it's hard." Cain turned to him, eyes searching. "And yet, here you are, right in the middle of this town, dealing with all its problems, and still standing. That's more than most can do." His tone was gentle but insistent, a quiet force that Eli felt deep in his chest. The moments between them stretched, filled with unspoken words and glances that carried more meaning than either could say aloud. Eli felt a tension rising, a pull he could no longer ignore. Cain, too, seemed aware of it, though he masked it with his usual calm demeanor. The creek's gentle murmur was the only sound between them, yet it carried a weight heavier than any storm Eli had ever faced. Later that week, the town faced a threat that tested both men in unexpected ways. A band of outlaws known for raiding nearby settlements had been spotted near Red River. Panic spread quickly, and Eli found himself worrying not only for his congregation but for Cain, who had no obligation to stay in a town so full of danger. Cain, however, was already in motion, gathering supplies and coordinating with the town's few able men. His confidence and decisiveness impressed Eli, yet also reminded him of the cowboy's untamed nature, a force he could neither control nor predict. During a tense night, as the town prepared for a potential attack, Eli found himself beside Cain, helping fortify the church and nearby homes. The moon cast long shadows, and the air was thick with anticipation. "You shouldn't have to do this," Eli said, his voice low. "You don't owe anyone protection." Cain looked at him, his gaze steady. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I can't stand by and do nothing. Not when people need help, and not when someone like you is involved." The words struck Eli more than he expected. There was concern, yes, but also an honesty and care that went beyond the ordinary. As the night stretched on, the tension between them deepened. They worked side by side, sharing quiet conversations about life, faith, and the hardships they had faced. Cain revealed small pieces of his past, the towns he had left, the mistakes he had made, and the loneliness that had followed him. Eli listened with empathy, feeling a bond grow that neither could deny. He realized that Cain's rough exterior masked a heart capable of vulnerability, a heart that mirrored his own quiet strength. The next morning, after the outlaws had passed without incident, Eli and Cain found themselves alone on a hill overlooking the town. The sunrise painted the horizon in shades of pink and gold. "You know," Cain said, breaking the silence, "I've never met anyone like you. Someone who sees the world, yet doesn't let it harden them." Eli turned to him, surprised by the sincerity in Cain's tone. "And you carry the weight of so many things, yet you still care?" he replied. "It's rare." Cain's eyes softened, and for a brief moment the walls he had built around himself seemed to fall away. "I want to protect you, Eli," he said quietly. "Even if it means changing the way I live, even if it's not easy." Eli felt a warmth in his chest, a mixture of relief and fear. He had never experienced such a clear, undeniable connection with anyone before, and yet he also knew the danger of getting too close to someone like Cain, a man whose life was full of unpredictability, a man who could vanish as quickly as he had appeared. Over the following days, the bond between them strengthened. Cain's presence was constant, but subtle. He offered help, shared moments of quiet laughter, and challenged Eli's perspectives in ways that made him think deeply. Eli, in turn, found himself drawn to Cain's complexity, fascinated by the balance of strength and vulnerability that defined him. One afternoon, as Eli delivered supplies to a family recovering from illness, Cain appeared at the edge of the yard. "You're always helping others," he said, his tone teasing yet warm. "Do you ever think about yourself?" Eli paused, considering the question. "I think about the people I serve," he replied. "That's enough for me." Cain shook his head, smiling. "Maybe, but even someone strong like you needs someone to lean on. Don't forget that." Eli felt a strange comfort in Cain's words. There was a sincerity in the cowboy's concern that went beyond casual interest. He realized that Cain had become more than a passing presence in his life. He had become a force that challenged him, inspired him, and stirred emotions he could no longer deny. The days continued, filled with small moments that deepened their connection. Cain helped Eli in practical ways, whether it was mending fences, guiding horses, or lending a hand with chores. But more importantly, he offered emotional support, listening without judgment, understanding without question. Eli, in turn, began to see Cain not just as a rugged cowboy, but as a man capable of profound thought, care, and loyalty. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Cain found Eli sitting alone outside the church, watching the sky. "You're thinking again," Cain said, sitting beside him. Eli smiled faintly. "Ah, I can't help it," he admitted. "There's so much to consider, and yet I find myself thinking of you more than I expected." Cain's expression softened, and for a moment, he seemed almost vulnerable. "I felt the same," he said quietly. "I didn't expect it either. But here we are." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning yet safe in their honesty. There was no rush, no expectation, only a shared understanding that their connection was real, profound, and slowly growing. That night, as Eli returned home, he felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Cain had opened a door to emotions he had never explored, feelings that challenged his perspective and drew him closer to someone he could not fully understand. And yet, he also knew that this bond, though powerful, came with responsibility, a responsibility to navigate carefully, to respect boundaries, and to protect the hearts now intertwined in ways neither could ignore. As the moon rose over Red River, Cain watched Eli from a distance, a quiet determination in his eyes. He knew that the connection they shared was special, rare, and worth protecting. And he also knew that their journey together, though filled with challenges, had only just begun. The summer sun had begun to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across Red River. The town seemed quieter than usual, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Eli walked through the streets, his mind heavy with thoughts he could not shake. The bond between him and Cain had grown stronger with each passing day, yet Eli still felt the pull of caution. He knew the connection they shared was powerful, but he also knew the world around them could not always understand it. Cain was already nearby, leaning against the fence of the general store. His posture was relaxed, yet there was a tension in his eyes, a quiet alertness that Eli had learned to recognize. As Eli approached, Cain straightened slightly, a slow, almost imperceptible smile appearing on his face. "You're late," he said lightly, though there was warmth in his tone. Eli smiled faintly. "I had to check on the Andersons. Their crops were failing again." He adjusted the strap of his satchel, feeling a familiar flutter of nerves at being so close to Cain. "And I suppose you were already here?" Cain nodded. "I like to know what's happening in my town. And in my town it seems you're always doing something important." His gaze softened as he studied Eli, and for a moment the world around them seemed to fade. The past weeks had tested both men in ways they had not expected. Cain had helped Eli face challenges he never thought he would encounter, from outlaws passing near the town to families in desperate need of care. Eli, in turn, had helped Cain see that strength did not always mean facing the world alone, that trust and connection could be as powerful as courage and skill. Their bond had deepened into something unspoken but undeniable, a connection of heart and mind that neither could ignore. That evening, as the town settled into the quiet of dusk, Eli found himself walking along the edge of the river. The water glimmered in the fading light, reflecting the colors of the sunset. Cain appeared beside him without a sound, his presence a steady anchor. "You think too much," Cain said softly, nudging Eli with his shoulder. Eli laughed lightly, a sound that surprised even him. "I can't help it," he admitted. "There's so much to consider, so much that I've never felt before." Cain's eyes softened, and he placed a hand briefly on Eli's arm. "Then consider this," he said, his voice quiet but certain. "You don't have to face everything alone."
Not if you don't want to.
A word settled over Eli like a warm blanket. He realized, in that moment, that Cain's presence had become essential to him. The cowboy was more than a protector, more than a companion. He was a part of his life in a way that Eli could not ignore, no matter how carefully he tried to keep his heart guarded. In the following days, the town faced another challenge. A fire had broken out in the fields near the outskirts, threatening homes and livestock. Panic spread quickly, and Eli found himself rushing to help, despite his fear and exhaustion. Cain was already there, coordinating efforts to contain the fire and guide townsfolk to safety. The sight of Cain, fearless and determined, filled Eli with admiration and something deeper, an unspoken awareness of the intensity of their bond. They worked side by side, moving hay bales, carrying water, and helping people to safety. The sun beat down on them, sweat dripping from their brows, yet neither stopped. Eli felt a surge of pride and warmth toward Cain, realizing that this man had risked everything not out of obligation, but because he genuinely cared. And in that shared effort, something shifted. The tension that had lingered between them became a force of connection, a recognition that their hearts were no longer separate. As the fire was finally brought under control, Cain and Eli found a moment alone, leaning against a large oak tree near the riverbank. Their breaths came heavy, hearts still racing from the exertion. "You were incredible today," Eli said quietly, his voice filled with awe. Cain shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "We did it together," he replied. "And besides, I've learned that you're not someone who gives up easily. That's inspiring." Eli felt a warmth spread through him, stronger than he had ever felt before. "Cain," he began, but the words caught in his throat. He was unsure how to express the emotions building inside him. Admiration, trust, and a deep, undeniable connection that neither logic nor caution could explain. Cain placed a hand on Eli's shoulder, steadying him. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "I know what you're feeling, and I feel it too." The admission hung between them, unspoken but powerful. In that moment, Eli realized that his heart had already chosen, even if his mind still struggled with the implications. Cain had become more than a presence in his life. He was a force, a constant in a world full of uncertainty. Over the next few days, Eli and Cain spent more time together, their bond growing stronger with each shared task, each quiet conversation. They visited families, helped rebuild homes damaged by the fire, and spent evenings walking along the river, sharing stories and moments of laughter. There was a rhythm to their connection, a quiet understanding that neither needed to define with words. One afternoon, as Eli delivered supplies to the church for a town gathering, Cain appeared at the edge of the crowd, leaning casually against a fence. His eyes found Eli's, and the warmth of his gaze made Eli's chest tighten. Cain approached him quietly, slipping a hand into Eli's for a brief moment before letting go. "You're always thinking about others," Cain said, his tone light yet meaningful. "Don't forget to think about yourself." Eli smiled faintly, feeling a mixture of comfort and tension. "I suppose I've learned that from you," he said. "You've taught me that strength doesn't mean facing the world alone." Cain's expression softened. "And you've taught me that even someone like me can care deeply without losing themselves," he said quietly. The words left Eli speechless, a realization settling over him like a gentle wave. Their connection was no longer simply about admiration or curiosity. It was about understanding, trust, and a shared bond that neither could deny. As the evening approached, the town gathered for a small celebration. giving thanks for safety after the fire and for the bonds that had been strengthened through hardship. Eli and Cain stood together, side by side, watching the people they had helped. The town's acceptance of Cain had grown, and though whispers remained, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the cowboys' efforts and heart. Later that night, as the sky darkened and stars appeared one by one, Eli and Cain walked along the riverbank, the water reflecting the moonlight. "I never expected any of this," Eli said softly, his voice filled with wonder. "I didn't expect to feel this way." Cain looked at him, eyes steady and sincere. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But sometimes the unexpected is the most real, the most important." Eli paused, taking a deep breath. "Cain, I've realized something. I don't want to ignore this connection anymore. I don't want to pretend it isn't there." Cain's expression softened, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "You never had to." The two stood together in silence, the river flowing beside them, the stars shining above. In that quiet moment, they both understood the truth. Their bond was real, profound, and worth every risk, every challenge, and every fear. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and inner conflict, yet they had emerged stronger, connected, and ready to face whatever came next, together. As the night deepened, they returned to the town, walking side by side, hearts lighter yet full of emotion. The journey that had begun with curiosity and tension had transformed into something enduring, a bond of trust, understanding, and unspoken love. Red River, with all its challenges and hardships, had become the place where two hearts, seemingly different in every way, found a connection that could not be denied. Eli looked at Cain, a small smile on his lips, and felt a sense of peace he had never known. "We've come a long way," he said softly. Cain nodded, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "And we still have a long way to go," he replied. "But I wouldn't want to walk it with anyone else." As they stood there, the town sleeping quietly around them, Eli realized that life could be unpredictable, dangerous, and challenging, but it could also be filled with moments of beauty, connection, and trust. And with Cain by his side, he felt ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that some bonds were too strong, too real, to ever be broken. And so, under the vast night sky, with the river flowing gently at their feet and the town resting in peace, Eli and Cain took their first steps toward a shared life, a life built on trust, understanding, and a bond that had survived trials, danger, and the test of their hearts. In the end, the cowboys' confession had not led to destruction, but to a connection deeper than either had imagined. They were no longer simply Eli the preacher and Cain the cowboy. They were partners in a story that had only just begun, ready to face the world together, bound by respect, care, and an unspoken promise that whatever challenges came, they would not face them alone.